Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Gen Politics. So I just watched Kamala Harris's new ad, and I thought it was parody. I swear, I thought it was a parody when I first watched it, like a Babylon Bee kind of thing. But oh my gosh, it's real, and it's so bad. So let's take a look at it real quick, and then I'm going to kind of explain my thoughts on it.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Meat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
And I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse. I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually. Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful. That's not how my mama raised me.
I love women.
I love women who support their families.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
So it's just an ad saying, oh, I'm man enough to do all these effeminate things and be comfortable with that. It's like there's a big difference between not doing something because you're afraid to do it, which is what this is like making the point that men are afraid to do all these effeminate things, and then not wanting to do something because you just don't want to do it. Like, it's just not normal. It's like, oh, I'm not afraid to cry in public. It's like, you shouldn't be crying in public. Like, that's not something you should desire to do. It happens. You know, it's understandable, but like as a man, it's not something you desire to do. It's like, oh, I'm not intimidated by women. And it's like, I think most of the men who aren't voting for Kamala aren't voting for her because they're intimidated. They just think her policies suck. And so there's this whole like frame, and they chose like the least masculine guys you can. You have like this morbidly obese guy, a bunch of these like weak looking guys. They're talking like they're all funny and effeminate. One's got his, his legs crossed. It's like, it's very bizarre. Like, it's like you made an ad about men for men and you've never met a man. That's kind of like what the Harris campaign is doing, is they don't know how to appeal to men because they hate men. They hate masculinity. They truly hate masculinity. And at the same time, they're trying to get men on board. And they're like, why don't they like us? It's like, because you threaten masculinity at every turn. And then you belittle anybody who wants to act like a traditional man, Be emotionally stable. Be mature. Don't make all these snarky comebacks. Don't like make these weird like judgments about how somebody's offended or like emasculated because they don't want to do something. Like, the masculine thing to do is the feminine thing. And if you do the masculine thing, you're only doing it because you're like intimidated by femininity. It's like, no, that's not the case for most men, I would say. I can't think of anybody who acts like a masculine person because they're afraid of being seen as like effeminate. That's very weird. So I don't think this is going to work at all. I think this is driving men further away. That's why you see the blue collar worker men who like have had their masculinity attacked their whole lives. Not only them, but their sons having to grow up in a world that's trying to make them effeminate. They're not going to vote for her. And that's why she's losing the blue collar workers and losing men. She can't get men on board. And then they had the other thing where they tried to like send Tim Walz out to play World of Warcraft with gamers to try to get like the youth male vote, which young men don't play World of Warcraft anymore. Like, that's more of a millennial thing, not a Gen Z thing. And like, he didn't even play, and it was really weird. And it's like, this is super desperate. And you're trying to like attract men on hobbies or like weird perceptions you have of men and what they do versus actually trying to get them on the policies that men are interested in. So, men are interested in providing for their families. How about talking about the economy? Men are interested in forming relationships with women. So maybe talk about how you're going to help the mental health in the country, what you're going to do to kind of improve the birth rates, like incentivize that. Anything like that could be helpful. You know, it's hard to say based on the individual what they want to hear and what they would take as, you know, enough incentive to vote for somebody. But attacking them and saying, you're not a man unless you vote for Kamala Harris is not the way to do it. Shaming people into doing something typically is not the best thing to do, especially if you're trying to get them on your side and like get organic support for you. It doesn't really work out well by just telling them that if you don't support me, you're a bad person. I mean, look at what happened when Hillary called all the Republicans deplorables. You know, that invigorated them. It rallied them around Trump. They said, well, if you're going to call me a deplorable anyways, you clearly don't care about me. It's not like, oh man, he's tricking you and, you know, come to our side. It's, oh, you like him? You're deplorable. You're a disaster. And then they're saying, oh, if you don't like Harris, you're not a real man. You know, real men cross their legs and cry at predator. It's like, what? It's so bizarre. It's like a clown world we're living in. So it doesn't do any favors. I think it does more harm than good. She continues to hemorrhage the male vote, and she can't get them on board. You know, instead of going and doing an interview talking about her policies of war, you know, men are afraid of the draft coming back. Talk about what your international policy is going to be instead of going, who's your daddy? And talk about sex. That's not really something men are too interested in. So it's like they're not appealing to men at all. They shill this thing out. It's probably the worst political ad I've ever seen. Like, I really thought it was a joke, especially the part where the guy said, you have my full-throated endorsement, which we know why that's funny. But I literally thought it was a parody, but I guess it's not. I guess they really thought this was the best they could do. They put this out there and they're like, oh man, this is really gonna get the men, you know. They love cowboy hats and beer. That's what they need to vote for us. And it's not gonna work. Like the men care more about the policy. Funny enough, they don't want to be typecast and say, oh, well, we have trucks in our ad, so you should vote for us. It's like, that's not how that's going to work. Like they want the policy. People want policy. She's not given any policy. It's all rhetoric. And this rhetoric is doing more harm than good. I think they're just throwing things at the wall because they don't know what to do. They're hemorrhaging different sectors of voters and they don't know how to get them back without, you know, revealing policy, in which they don't want to do because either they don't have policy or it's too insane that they know no one will support it. Either way, they're not telling it for one of those two reasons. So there's no policy. It's just rhetoric, you know, vote for us. She's first woman. Isn't that great? Like, isn't that the best qualification is to just be born with 2 X chromosomes, you know, vote for us. It's not going to work. And as we can see, she's going down further in the polls week by week. Every time she comes out and does one of these things, or like they throw out one of these things, it hurts them more than it helps them because people are begging. It's the only thing they want. They want, what are your policies? Here's this ad. What are your policies? We're going to play video games. What are your policies? I'm going to go on this podcast, but we're only going to talk about like abortion. It's like, what are your policies on everything else? Give us anything to know who you are and what you want to do. And the political ads of shaming people into voting for you is not going to work. Because you know who is masculine? The guy who got shot in the head and then got up, pumped his fist in the air and said, fight, fight, fight. That's pretty damn masculine with blood dripping down his face. That's probably the most masculine thing a president has done in recent history. I think like objectively, it is the most masculine thing a president's done in recent history. And so to try to compare like Kamala to Trump and say like, Kamala is the real one who supports masculinity is just the biggest farce on the planet. We know the Democrats hate masculinity. They've been attacking it for years. Anytime people get interested in masculinity, the people who are pushing that movement always get shut down, right? Like look at how hard they went after Andrew Tate and all his followers. Anytime there's any semblance of masculinity, not saying he's like an amazing role model, but just like work out, eat healthy. It's like, nope, that's a threat to democracy. It's a threat to our system when, young men gain a consciousness and start to want their own ideals and have a family and a house and private property. And any sort of individualism is really bad for the system. And that's why they attack it. They attack masculinity to no end because they know it's the biggest threat to their system is when men come together and say something's wrong and we're going to do something about it. And they hate that. And so they, at the same time, they have to garner that support of the men because they need the votes. but they don't want to encourage masculinity. So they warp it and they say, oh, real masculinity is being a doormat. Real masculinity is doing whatever your wife tells you to, doing whatever the women in your lives want. You should just vote without thinking about it. Just because, you hate women if you don't vote for abortion on demand. That's not really masculine, is it? It's like a warped sense of empathy, warped sense of masculinity, and the men aren't buying it, right? Clearly, like the numbers go down. She doesn't have the support of men. And I don't think it's because they're intimidated that she's a woman. I think that it's just she's got terrible policies and they don't want to support her because of that. And no amount of shame or guilt or whatever is going to convince people to switch to her side. So that's my thought on this. I thought it was hilarious. I want to see more. I hope they do more of these in Desperation because it'd be hard to top this one, but I can't wait to see what they put out next. So I really appreciate you watching. If you like the video, like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.